and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for attending the Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting of July 19th, 2017. And introduce the board members and consultants. To my left, we have Robert Anzalone. To my right, Sandra Capriglione, Chris Ciavelli, Rich Cottagio, our secretary, Gail Nogel. All the way to the far table, we have our engineer, Natalie, our planner, Stu, and our attorney, Rick Golden, and I'm Maria Hunter, your chairperson. Board members, have you had a chance to review the minutes from June 21st? And if so, do we have a motion to accept?
I make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item on the agenda is Woodview Heights. Discuss extension request for preliminary subdivision approval. Said property is located on Hill Avenue in Highland Mills and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 204, Block 1, Lot 34.2. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, my name is John Locke.
Is that on? Green light on?
Now we have a green light.
Beautiful.
Thank you. My name is John Locke. I'm an engineer and land surveyor for AFR Engineering and Land Surveying. The applicant has been reviewing the issues that were raised by your engineering consultant with respect to the continuing in the development process on this. We've essentially finished what our firm was putting together for them. The applicant is taking it and reviewing it with, I believe, his attorney at this time. I was asked by the applicant to ask for an additional extension so that their legal counsel could review it. And also, when we met in May, I believe Mr. Golden indicated he was putting together a memorandum on this. If there is one available, to get a copy of that.
Okay. Anything else?
And that's it.
All right. Rick, would you like to make any comment before I go out to the board here?
Sure. My memorandum is going to be somewhat fact-specific, and I need the response of the applicant to Dennis's query. The memorandum is, as I had stated to the board verbally, is that an extension is warranted unless the project triggers one of three issues, one of which is an abandonment, which hasn't happened here. I can't remember right now. The second one, which also is inapplicable. The changes in the zoning, and there has been some changes in zoning, and so we have to deal with that. I think net lot area is one of the things that we have to deal with to see whether or not that matters and warrants a re-review of the project for that basis. And the third one, and most substantially for this, is the change in circumstances. And as to the change in circumstances, Dennis has raised several points in his memo with respect to change in circumstances of development in that area of the village over the past 21 years. And so in order for me to flesh out for the board and give some guidance for the board whether or not that's sufficient to not extend it, I need the applicant's response to Dennis's statements that there has been some changes in circumstances. And whether or not those are material, I need the applicant's input on that. And then I will submit a memo before your next meeting. I assume that I will have the applicant's response before then, and then I will circulate that to this board as well as to the applicant, so the applicant will have it prior to the next meeting. In addition to that, in a similar analytical model, under this received back in 1995, either 94 or 95, it received a negative declaration after being listed. There was no expanded Part 3, there was no EIS involved, which is all well and good, but there have been changed circumstances, and as you considered most recently in another application here, is that there are times when a neg deck may be opened up on a couple of different bases, one of which is, again, a change in material circumstances surrounding the project. So when we get the response of the applicant to Dennis's notice of certain changed circumstances and whether or not they think they're material or not, I'll incorporate that into the structure of the memo that I already have, and then give advice to the board, which will also be given to the applicant so they can be prepared for your next meeting. So I think that, given all of that, the applicant has had some time to respond, has asked for additional time to respond. Given the fact that it's been 21 years, I don't think another 60 days is out of the question, but it is extending it now without the same kind of good reason that you have extended it for the prior 21 years. So I think that if you desire this to be a firm 60-day requirement for them to come back, and prior to that time, consistent with your time to submit materials prior to the meeting that they're going to be on, you can go ahead and set that date and state that it's a firm date. And if they don't meet that date, then there'd be cause for you to go ahead and not extend the preliminary approval.
Thank you. Natalie, Stu, comments or thoughts?
Just one comment. I just want to be sure. Clearly, there have been changing circumstances, and I think there may have been additional changes in the zoning besides the net lot area. I wouldn't be absolutely certain. I think the applicant was looking more closely at that, but there was a fairly significant revision to the code in 2011. So I think that needs to be looked at. It could be that it was exactly the same, but I think there were changes.
Thank you. Natalie?
Just to highlight some of the specific changes that Dennis had previously identified. The bulk requirements are subject now because these lots are served by public water and sewer, and that's where the lot area definition comes into play. It's changed since the original preliminary approval, requiring deduction of steep slopes, which may affect the application. Additionally, he noted some visual aspects that may need to be reconsidered, as well as the application would be subject to MS4 requirements and regulations, which I'm sure the applicant is aware of and going to address.
And we keep referring back to Dennis's memo from
That's dated May 12th.
May 12th, and that's from H2M. Okay. All right. Robert, thoughts, concerns, questions?
Are we going to hear plans as far as, what you'd like to do, as far as, is there anything definite at this point?
What I will do is, honestly, I didn't quite understand the sequence as was conveyed when we met in May. I will discuss with the applicant the sequence that we have to get things in so that your attorney can also review that. But at the same time, I do understand looking at a terminal date of 60 days or whatever's decided here to get things back in and reviewed. The plans essentially are, the applicant would like to go with the plans that were approved many, many years ago. They're not looking at substantial changes to it. There are some zoning issues, and we have looked at them. Without a doubt, some of the lots do not comply with the current area calculations with zoning. That's why they've asked, they're having their own legal counsel review some of the aspects of that. So I will convey what Mr. Golden has indicated this evening. Of course, we are aware really the same issues with Mr. Turner and through H2M. But no, we're not looking at a substantially different project.
Okay.
Okay. Sandy?
Well, I've been against the extension from the start, but if we can do 60 days and make it firm.
That would certainly be your call, I
Yeah,
understand.
I would go ahead with the 60 days as long as that caveat is in there that it's firm, and that if we don't have what we need, then there won't be any more extensions.
I understand.
Chris?
I'm just concerned whether or not 60 days is enough time for you to gather all the information you need to do, review the zoning, and get it back to us with, almost completion?
I've actually already reviewed the zoning and the area calculations and things, and the client is in the process of reviewing what we have on that. So to submit that to the board would not be a difficult task in terms of leading a lot of time. We do know that some of the issues in terms of addressing things like the MS4, we believe we can do that. We believe we can demonstrate that it's within the realm to do that. I also realize that to have that approved and things and reviewed thoroughly by your consultant will take more time than that. But I figure we'll address that when the time comes on that.
So you can live with 60 days
Yes.
if that's what we agreed to?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, I just have one question, I guess, for Rick. On the zoning change, I was under the impression that they would be grandfathered since this is 21 years old. But if that's not the case or not the option, and he's got to come back with a new plan, does he have to come back with the new plan in 60 days? Or does he come back in 60 days and say, because of the zoning change, I got to come back with a new plan?
Okay, with respect to your first inquiry, until there is a filed final subdivision plat that is filed with the county, until that time, any changes in zoning to any subdivision application has to be complied with by that applicant. Once they file it with the county for subdivisions, it's not like site plans, it's a different schedule. For subdivisions, they are entitled to the zoning as of the date that they file it with the county for 3 years. They have a 3-year statutory right to rely upon that zoning. So even if zoning changes after they file that plan, they don't have to comply with it for up to 3 years. And then there's other rules as to whether or not they would have vested rights after that. But up until that point in which they actually file it, so even after they get let's say, a final subdivision approval, and they're on the way to the county, and the local law and zoning takes effect that changes it, they now have to comply with the new zoning. So this, as only a preliminary, clearly has to comply with any zoning changes that has happened since the time of the approval.
And that's because we haven't given the final.
Well, we haven't given a final, and they haven't filed the plat with the county.
Okay.
It's filing of the plat with the county, not even your final approval, that triggers the 3-year statutory vesting in the zoning that was in place at that time.
Thank you.
And I've forgotten the second part of your question now that I was so verbose on the first part of your question. I
If he's not-
inflicted that on you as well.
I think he answered it too. If he's
you
not
answered.
grandfathered, does he have to come back with a new subdivision? And what would be the time frame, being that we're giving him 60 days? Is that when he
Well, we're giving him 60 days. It's up to the board. As I understand it, you're giving him 60 days to come back with the responses to Dennis's memo and a plan with respect to what they're going to do.
Right.
It would be best if, in fact, at that point, they also came up with their plan that needs to be zoning compliant.
Right.
In order to ensure that the planning board isn't going to say, well, you don't have a zoning compliant plan, therefore we're not going to extend the preliminary approval. That the board hasn't decided yet as to exactly what he has to have by the next time, whether it's a fully compliant plan or whether or not it's just, all right, this is where it's sufficient, these are our responses, and this is what we will do, and we'll submit that within 2 weeks, whatever it happens to be. So that's up to the board as to how they want to deal with that second aspect of how much he has to show by the end of this 60-day period.
Okay.
I have another question, Marianne. So, Rick, once he comes back and we agree that the plan is in place and we move forward, then it's just a regular subdivision plan that goes through the motions at this board level, correct?
But it really depends upon how he comes, what comes back. If it comes back, let's say one scenario is that he comes back with the necessary code modifications in his plan, so now his plan is code compliant, and the board determines that those changes that were made Well, not substantial changes at all. He changed some lot stuff and maybe modified his lot lines or maybe eliminated one lot as a result, whatever it happens to be. But it was not really a substantial change to the overall plan. This board would determine that it could go forward because it's not a substantial change. But if you determine that it's not in substantial compliance now with what he got before, and that's the test, is whether or not it's in substantial compliance with his the preliminary approval. If you find that he is not in substantial compliance because there's more than just modest changes that have had to be made, then you may say, well, now we have to go back to the preliminary, and now he's back to the stage of just prior to preliminary and asking you for a preliminary approval at that point in time. So it really depends on what he has. If he comes back also, so if he comes back with hardly any changes, not that you can say that it's in substantial compliance, then you can go ahead and say, we're going to go ahead and extend that preliminary subdivision, and now he's on to the final subdivision, and you deal with that as you would in the ordinary course.
But he's received the memo from Dennis that his zoning shows him what all the zoning requirements are with the new code, right?
Right.
So he knows what he has to do.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I just have one other question. Would there be a new public hearing on this?
If the plan that he comes back with,
Yeah.
this board determines even though it's changed, is in substantial compliance with the preliminary, then you're not allowed to have a new public hearing. You just proceed to final. But if you determine that it's not in substantial compliance with the preliminary approval, then he'll have to go back to the preliminary approval stage and get preliminary approval. He will have to have a public hearing in connection with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. With everything that's been said,
Need a motion?
just give me a second, I just lost where I wrote the dates down. Roughly 60 days would either be September 20th, or we can extend it further to October 4th. Those are our two meeting dates. I'm going to offer a motion that we extend this request to September 20th due to the fact that they were back with us in February, and they were told back then that, we're going to be reviewing the current zoning, and as of February 1st, it was 22 years that this original plan was given approval. So I would like to offer September 20th as a extension, and that on that date, we will have to have final answers to our questions, and if we have the information to move forward, we can. If not, it's a done deal. And then you'd have to, let me rephrase that. They would have to come back again and present us with a new application to conform to the zoning that's in place right now.
Yes, that's one of the things I did want to clarify in response to Chris's question is that all of this is a matter of degree. So if there's a lot of changes, and he may have to go back to a preliminary approval by you, a new preliminary approval. If in fact it's not in substantial compliance, but you don't feel you have to go back, depending upon the magnitude of the changes, he could proceed to final, make those changes, but you could require a public hearing on the final subdivision. So the only time that you're allowed a public hearing on the final subdivision is if what he is saying now for final is not in substantial compliance with preliminary. So a lot will depend upon the particulars as to how different it is from the preliminary, and then I can help guide you as to what would be the next step.
Okay.
All right, so my motion is to extend.
I just have one, I'd like one other statement in the minutes, Maria.
Can you wait till we get a second, Rick?
Okay,
Until I
go
have
ahead.
a discussion?
Thank you. Okay.
All right, so everyone understands that my motion is to extend to September 20th, and depending on what we have given to us for information, that will determine what our next step will be. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Rich, now you can discuss.
Yeah, I just like in the minutes, commenting what Rick said. Being that this was approved 22 years ago, we have to remember, at that time it was approved, the preliminary, there was no community called Strawtown. There was no community called Highland Lake Estates.
All right, Rich, I don't think that's the right time for us to discuss
No,
that.
I'm just saying, that's why I'm thinking of a public hearing.
I know, but right now, that's not what's on,
Okay.
okay?
Those are the issues that were raised by Dennis, and that's part of
Oh,
your
okay.
analysis when that comes
I
back.
was out on medical leave, if you recall, so I don't remember everything. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. That's 5 yes?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we'll see you on the 20th of September, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you for your time this evening.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda is Central Valley Properties. Just gonna get my file folder.
Madam Chair, I need to recuse myself from this application.
Okay. Okay, just for the record, just want to note that we received a letter from the New York State Department of Transportation on February 10th. And then on January 5th, we received a letter from the Orange County Department of Planning, which I'm sure the applicant has seen. And also note for the board that on next Wednesday, the Zoning Board of Appeals is going to act on their decision for this particular property. So they really have not formally made a motion and acted on this property. Just to let you know, review that. I know there's, Mr. Esposito's letter said that they received a favorable interpretation, but we don't have the final from the zoning board. And I think that was it. And we did receive, that was a letter. All right. And that's just about everything. So please state your name for the record and tell us what's going on.
Keith Woodruff from Engineering and Surveying Properties.
Is that on?
Yes.
Okay.
As you stated, we'd gone in front of the ZBA in order to get a determination as to some of the variances that we requested. As per the letter from Esposito and Associates, he said or stated that the zoning board made a favorable interpretation for the front yard setbacks requirements to comply with the current plan that we have last submitted in November and December of last year. At the request of the zoning board, they wanted to continue with the seeker process before they finalize their determination on the remaining outstanding items as far as the lot area and the use in conjunction with that lot area, as well as the parking lot screening and the driveway width. We are before you tonight in order to clarify any additional requirements that you have in regards to the seeker so that we can continue with that process, so that we can move on and get our ZBA determination and then come back to you for a follow-up.
Okay. Thank you. Natalie, I'm going to start with you as our usual customary way we do things.
Okay. From an engineering perspective, no new materials have been submitted aside from a revised EAF, to which we feel that they have addressed most of the consultant's comments. The only item that we would like to call attention to for the applicant's benefit is that item D1B regarding the acreage to be disturbed is now 1.1, which will require them to be in compliance under the general permit and prepare a stormwater prevention and pollution plan. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Stu?
Okay, I have several comments. I think Mr. Esposito and the applicant were primarily concerned on how how this board proceeds to try to complete seeker. And as the applicant has indicated, the zoning board had addressed the question of the interpretation of the front yard setback question. Their formal decision is awaiting the attorney's drafting, so that will be completed. The ZBA has to wait for you to complete seeker. What do you need to do to complete seeker? You did the lead agency coordination already. Nobody had objected to it. You could, and I always like to recommend that you formally confirm that you are the lead agency, so I would suggest you do that. There are some questions that need to be answered, and they need to be answered for the ZBA as well. On the question of the minimum lot area requirement, I think the applicant, at least to my knowledge, has not confirmed exactly how the property is proposed to be used, and so there's a difference of opinion as to whether it's a minimum lot area requirement of about 68,000 square feet versus 78,000 square feet. It depends on how many different uses there are. There are a couple of items that need to be submitted to your board, in our opinion, and we've raised this before, before you can complete seeker. At least it's our opinion that you need that before you complete seeker. One is that you had asked for a traffic study, which I don't think we have at this point. And Natalie had mentioned the question of, I want to be sure Dennis is satisfied with the proposed drainage, water and sewer. I think that water and sewer are not really an issue, but I think we need his opinion on that. And a whole series of site plan issues were raised earlier, but I think we need to wait to complete seeker and address those. The applicant is aware of many of those site plan applications. So the question is, the ZBA can't complete its considerations except on the front yard interpretation. Until seeker is completed, I don't believe the board can complete seeker until they are satisfied that they have a traffic analysis that they can analyze, and that the issues related to the drainage are addressed. I think the site is a developed site. It's not. We're not moving into virgin territory. So I'm not sure that it's an overly complex environmental analysis, but my recommendation is that you not complete it until you have those things.
Thank you. Rick?
I think the only appropriate step you can take now, given the ZBA, well, you don't have a variance yet, they've positively opined with respect to the interpretation and directed a decision consistent with that. I think it's appropriate for you to wait to take any substantive action on this application, because they may change some matters when they discuss this at the ZBA level, may add some conditions, et cetera. So I think it's prudent, as the chairwoman was indicating, that we need to wait until we actually have the decision and can't go just on the fact that they indicated that they're favorably disposed to the interpretation. But I agree with Stu that it would be appropriate for this board to assume lead agency and then wait for the variance and then move forward from there. Or wait for the decision on the interpretation and then move forward from there.
As you're aware, I did speak with the ZBA's attorney, who verified that that was the direction the board had gone, but that she was directed to draft a resolution, which they will consider at their next meeting.
Thank you. Rich?
Yes.
Thoughts, concerns, or any comments?
I'm good.
Sandy?
Stu, I have a question as far as, I feel like which came first, because if they're looking to complete SECRA with us before they go for the variances, how can we even ask for a traffic study if we're not sure what design is going to go on there?
Well, that's up to, I'm sorry, finish your
No,
thought.
no,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's going to be up to the applicant. Remember, the zoning board was dealing with a question of interpretation. There were two requirements for yard.
No, I understand that.
So they can't deal with, okay, I hear what you're saying. They can't deal with the substantive issues till we finish seeker here. On the other hand, you feel that we can't complete seeker until they do a traffic study, and they're not sure exactly how the
Right.
site's to
I
be
feel
developed.
like we're going around in a
Well, I
circle.
think they have to decide what it is they want to propose. And that's my opinion. They have to decide what they want to propose and do the traffic study based on that, or give you a traffic study that it illustrates the options, that if they go in one direction, there's a problem with traffic. If they go in a different direction, it's not as much of a problem. I mean, something like that. You have, that's a tough corner there, and then you've opined on that already.
Right.
And I think you even had some preliminary opinion from your traffic engineer, prior traffic engineer. So they need to do a study, and they, I think, have to decide how they propose to develop the site. Now, I know what you're saying. If the zoning board is not prone to give them
The
the
variance
other
would be-
variances, they don't know exactly how the site's going to be developed. But I think it's the amount of development that I think is a key question from the applicant's perspective.
And that's something that the applicant is in discussion with as far as nailing down the specific uses
Right.
and the areas and so forth. And like you said, that's something that we can incorporate into the traffic study as far as laying out alternative scenarios that we can account for, multiple options.
Yeah, there are ways to do it, but it's up to them. And when you get the traffic study, you'll decide if it's sufficient, or it's adequate, or it's appropriate.
Well, I mean, don't we decide what we want to see in the traffic study? So do we say the extreme? I mean, they're asking for 78,000 square feet. So do we base it on that and the uses that they've suggested previously? As far as
Well-
that, they said maybe a restaurant, maybe two, maybe not a restaurant, maybe, there were a lot of questions.
Well, based on VHB's memo from December 19th, they requested that in order to determine the scope and extent of that study, it is recommended that the applicant first provide the board with the project's trip generations and distributions for the peak AM, PM, and Saturday hours. So,
So
back
is that
in
the
December,
extreme?
well,
That's what I'm saying.
we need to get something from the applicant to see, okay, this, we agree with you, or we need to expand it. That's why we need to have the applicant, if they so desire to do this.
Right.
Until they do this, we can't go anywhere.
Well, one option is the applicant may decide to prepare a traffic study based on the maximum potential development that
That's what I'm
we've
saying,
outlined.
the extreme
And you'll have
part
that.
of it.
I mean,
Okay.
they also went in there about the need to have left turn restrictions for
Right.
exiting traffic at one or both driveways.
Right.
So they have this memo, so they have to make a decision. And then once they give us something, then we can say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, or okay. So we don't have anything to go with. So that's our problem right now.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I feel like we're kind of spinning in a circle here.
Yeah, we've had this before.
yeah.
Applicants have gone before the board and the zoning board at the same time. They can't make a determination until we do ours, and it's the applicant's own risk, for lack of word, or?
Yeah. It's a little bit different than risk in a sense. What it is that it's the applicant's project, right? And so the applicant has to determine, the ZBA, even if they did an uncoordinated review, they still need, this isn't something that is a type 2 action, so they would need to be informed as to the traffic study, rather than having that done in two different spots, one for variances only and the others for site plan. What is normally done, and this board has done previously when you've had to go back and forth with the ZBA and the planning board, is that the environmental review is going to determine first by the applicant defining what the project's going to be and what the impacts are going to be. So the applicant can try to say, all right, I'm going to take a risk and say it's only going to be this much. But if it turns out later that they want some other impact, now they have to go back and study it. So what Stu was saying before, and what Maria was saying, is that most times what an applicant will do is come in and say, all right, we don't know that we're going to be doing all these things, but let's assume a worst-case scenario, the most impact. That way we'll study that most impact, do whatever mitigations are necessary, and then if we have something less than that, then we're covered. We don't have to go back and redo seeker. So it's really up to the applicant to define what their application is going to be, and that will define and guide you as to what you believe is the next necessary scope of traffic study or any other studies that you want done with respect to seeker.
Does that make sense, Sandy? I mean,
No, I understand what he's saying, what both of you are saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that that's,
It's,
I just want to make sure that that base is covered, that the maximum or extreme is covered, so, okay.
Well, if
I'm
it's, again, it's going to be decided by the applicant. The applicant may do less than the extreme, but if it determines that now they're going to propose later on something that wasn't studied, then they're going to have a supplemental potentially study in order to cover that aspect.
Right, well, that's kind of what I would hope that we wouldn't get caught in. I mean, because right now, they seem to be proposing like the most use of the property as they can.
That's what most applicants do in order
Right.
to not have to redo seeker. So they'll go ahead and propose uses, maybe that it's unlikely that they're going to have, but it's like, well, let's just study them now, and then we'll be covered for whatever option we want later on.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah. My question was similar to Sandy's, but at what point will we be able to get a clearer direction of the type of businesses or the traffic study on your part?
That will be undertaken after this meeting. We'll be going through with the traffic study and then completing the different alternatives and scenarios and so forth, so that once the traffic study is completed and submitted to you for your review or through the professional's review, it'll outline as far as what the proposed use will be. At this point, I mean, obviously, no changes have been made to the plan since last year, and that we were more so trying to go through the ZBA process and not necessarily trying to iron out every single scenario. So in the next iteration or the next submission, we'll have a more accurate representation as to what the full development of the site will be.
Okay, thank you.
But I think Robert's question is that going to happen before or after the traffic study, are you saying?
It'll be in conjunction with the traffic study, so that when we submit the traffic study, we'll be submitting a new set of
Okay,
plans.
but I think you're missing where some of the board members are going. In order for them to determine what's the appropriate traffic study and what needs to be studied, they need to know your uses. So you have to tell them, if you're going to say that our uses is just as we previously presented, that's fine, and the traffic study is going to be done only on those. And if you decide later that you want a different one, it's your problem in that you may have to go back and do more traffic study as a result.
As of right now, we are not changing the plan, so if we do a traffic study, we're doing it based on the current plan
Okay.
set.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. My questions have been, I've been listening to everything. Before we go any further, I'd like to, is there a motion to declare ourselves lead agency?
I make that motion.
Do you have a
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4 yes. All right, so that's done. All right, so at this point, it's going to be incumbent upon the applicant to come up with a traffic study, and once that's submitted, we just have to make sure that all our consultants, including our traffic consultants, what's the L, Stu, help me here, all these initials. No. On this project, I have two, VHB. I have two different traffic consultants going with two different projects. So this would go back to Andrea and John, because they're the original ones on this one. So, so once you, Keith, get everything put together, you and Steve, and submit it back to the planning board, then we can move forward.
Okay,
All right? So we'll see you soon.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Have a good night. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Highland Mills Center Group. Review and discuss application submitted for proposed 84-unit senior housing complex on vacant property located off of Route 32 near the intersection with Ford Avenue and Highland Mills. Said property is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 218, Block 2, Lot 7, 9 through 11 and 13. Just give me a moment. I want to get the right folder.
Maria?
Yes, sir.
I have to make a statement regarding this application.
Excuse me?
I have to make a statement, so tell me when I can speak.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I need to make a statement regarding this application. At the advice of counsel, I've been instructed to share that I've had a relationship with this applicant at the time they purchased the property. We were embroiled in a lawsuit. The lawsuit was successful. It's been settled, and they have no other obligation to me, nor do I to them. I do feel that I can act fairly in moving forward with this applicant. So I just wanted to go on the record of saying that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, with that being said, I just want to, on June 7th, we received the application with the required LLC form. On June 7th, we also received the full EAF. The Orange County DPW responded on June 21st. We have memos from H2M on 7/14 and NPNV memo on 7/13. I think that's it so far. So if the applicant would like to give us an overview of the project, do you have any maps to put up? No? There we go. All right. Just state your name for the record, please.
I'm George Lithgow of Jacobowitz and Govitz. We're the project attorney. And with me is Joseph Pfau of Peter Zack and Pfau. He is the project engineer. We have some procedural points to discuss with regard to seeker. As your consultants point out, we do need to obtain an overlay zoning from the village board. So we need to coordinate that process. We hope that, we expect and hope that the planning board will be acting as lead agency. So we would like to start the seeker process tonight, if that is acceptable to you, with a circulation of notice of intent. We probably will have some discussion with your consultants, or you will probably have some discussion with your consultants about the procedure to be followed. I believe we need a direction from you to go to the village board. They obviously need to have you do seeker, so we're going to repeat some of the discussion you just had with the last applicant. I think it's likely we'll be required to do a traffic study, and we'd like to coordinate with the board and its consultants regarding that traffic study so we can start the process of determining the scope that needs to be studied and engage a consultant to undertake that study so that you'll have the information you need for your seeker review. I think that's basically what I need to say, and then Mr. Pfau is going to, he's had an opportunity to review your consulting comments. I think most of the issues in there are either procedural or concern site plan issues in some respects. There were some comments noted by the engineer regarding revisions to the AF. We've looked at that. We will make those revisions. I think they're all acceptable. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Good evening, everyone.
Excuse me, you need to take the microphone that's lying down somewhere over there, or take that one so I can hear you.
Yeah.
And it's on, right?
Yes.
Okay, we got one, Rick. He's using that one. And your first name again?
My name is Joe Pfau.
Joe, okay.
Yes. Just really quickly, I'll do a quick description of the project. What we submitted was a 3-sheet set. It's an overall sketch site plan showing the entirety of the property, and then a blow-up of the area of development, and then the third sheet is actually a density analysis for the proposed senior housing overlay zone that we're looking to obtain from the village board. It's about just shy of 24 acres of property. It's on the easterly side of New York State Route 32. Our access point is actually directly across, proposed to be directly across from Timber Ridge. So there will be hopefully eventually a four-way intersection at that point. There will be a single main entrance in, two proposed senior housing buildings, each building with 42 units. We're proposing 180 parking spaces, and at this point, we're also considering a potential, an emergency access back out to New York State Route 32. Of course, the DOT will have some input on this, but we're also proposing a secondary emergency access to the easterly or the rear of the property, which will tie into the existing, there's an existing trailer park, or mobile home park in the rear of the property. Almost all of the property is in the LC zone, with the exception of the rear portion back here, which is in the R-2A zoning district. We are adjacent to some other residential zones to the north and to the south. And that shows you that plan. And what I wanted to do real quickly is just go through the density plan. There was some comments from Stu. What I did here, I wanted to kind of address these comments. We originally, when we did the density calculations, it was basically based on the full 24-acre piece of property. And what we've done now, we've identified this red area is actually the area that we're going to be proposing to be the SH zone limits. Okay, and the yellow highlight is another issue that was brought up, which will actually be an additional lot. We'll actually be doing a subdivision plan as part of this application. So all of the property within the red is completely in the LC zone. That is what we're proposing, and we will update this plan to show that is going to be the SH zone. Everything else will remain in their existing zones. Lot 2 will continue to stay in the LC zone, and the back portion of proposed Lot 1 will continue to be in the R2A zone. But as far as the density calculations themselves, they will stay exactly the same. We've removed this back portion of the rear portion of the lot in its entirety from the density calculations, and we previously removed what we're now calling proposed Lot 2 from the density calculations. So those calculations themselves will not change. And that's pretty much, and just, I wanted to just make a point that this is going to be senior housing, and it is proposed to be market rate senior housing, which I believe, has done some marketing studies, and there's certainly a need for that, in this area. Thank you.
Before you take the map down, and while you're still standing there with the red marks, for lack of the little thin finger that's coming off of there, where the yellow line is? No, at the top.
Yes.
On 32.
Oh, this thing?
Yes, I'm just going to just give me a second. I'm going to make a comment, because that, I think, is currently the mortgage office.
Correct.
All right, I see you have parking to the south of it. There's 4 parking spots there on the map?
Yes.
All right, Rick, just keep this in mind. I got to figure out how we take away that calculation, because I'm presuming that parking is for the mortgage company, because they don't have parking per se. So Rick, I just want to make note of that. How do you take out the calculation away from this whole senior housing for that parking that's for another lot that's not theirs?
But they have to propose in their bulk table for the plan how they comply with zoning and which, and including the parking,
Okay.
and which lots are included in that, which parking spaces are included in that, and which are not. And once they do that, then that will be looked at by Stu and by Dennis.
Okay.
Or Natalie, and determined as to whether or not it's compliant. And if it's not, they'll indicate in what manner it's not, and then we'll deal with that. The planning board deals with that.
Okay, and then also keep in mind, there's, next to the mortgage company, where the north side of where the potential emergency access drive is, there is a current home up there right now. Is that going to remain or get pulled down? Because that would have to be calculated into the bulk requirements. Then you go into where the it drops down with a larger red mark going north. See where it says? Yes. That piece right there, that's privately owned, so that we know that's not included in this. But then you go to the north side of that, there's another house. Is that going to be torn down or taken into calculation towards the bulk requirements? I know I've asked you this last time, yes. There's a third house up there. There's 3 homes up there, and I only see, you have the business, 3 homes, and one of them is a privately owned property. So I'm asked this last time. I don't want to forget about those 2 homes that are there. Are they coming down? And are you excluding them from the bulk? Just to keep it in mind. I wanted to put it out there first and foremost again. With all that being said, Natalie, your thoughts and concerns, please. And when I say I spoke about this before, I'll take that back to everyone. This has not been before the board formally. It was due to a pre-app meeting done way back in September of 2015. I just want to be clear about, I did not have any meetings I had my attorney there present and my engineer. Okay, Natalie?
Okay. As the applicant has already described, this is an 84-unit senior housing complex on a portion of a 5-lot parcel located in Highland Mills. One of the lots is a split zone lot. Neither the LC nor the R2A zones, which these lots are located in, permit the senior housing development. And as the applicant has indicated in their responses to the EAF and in their description to you tonight, they will be seeking a zone change from the Village Board of Trustees upon your recommendation. Since the application is non-complying with the existing zoning, no action on the subdivision, site plan, and special permit can take place unless a zone change is approved. Nevertheless, in accordance with your typical practice, we anticipate you will conduct the required seeker review, and we have provided some comments for your consideration. As far as the conduction of your seeker review, we will defer to Attorney Golden and Planner Turner as to the process. We want to just kind of make some notes regarding our previous memo. We reviewed the local law amendment a little further, and our comment 1D regarding the permitted density, the applicant is complying with that, so that could be struck from our memo.
What page is that on?
That's
I'm on the wrong one.
page 2,
Thank you.
section B1D. Okay. So the applicant has also identified that portion that will be removed from the subdivision, which we think is appropriate now that they've further defined that, and on subsequent map revisions, they should call that out further, as well as any setbacks from that property. Because that they have indicated now that that new lot will be in the LC zone, it's important that we review that for all the bulk regulations and make sure that it will be able to be developed. And if not, then that should be brought to the Village Board of Trustees' attention as well. We have some comments on layout, parking, and the general circulation. If the applicant would like us to review that, or the board, we can. In regards to utilities, the water and sewer, the plan notes that the facility shall be served by central water and sewer facilities as required under the senior housing zone. We believe that the applicant should obtain the requirements of the water and sewer administrator and show them on the plan. And adequate water capacity for fire protection should be considered. In regards to stormwater, a stormwater pollution prevention plan that includes the post-construction stormwater management practices should be required for this construction activity and must be prepared and submitted by the applicant. We also have comments on landscaping, signs, which we will defer to Planner Turner. This application will be subject to the ARB review, and the applicant should provide the rear side and front elevations of the structures for your review. The applicant, we had a few comments on the EAF, which the applicant has indicated that they will comply with and revise that as necessary. Again, we'll defer to your consultant's and council on the proper procedure with how to proceed with that.
Natalie?
Yes?
Can I just ask you a question there?
Sure.
On, for the EAF Part 1, on question number 1?
Yep. That's a good point. That was, again, referring back to that original
Yeah,
density.
because,
That's-
well, it said 1, or B1E, that should have been B1D, but now B1D is gone, so that one is out, right?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Question BC, that's no longer applicable. Thank you. And then also, again, as Maria, you kind of previously highlighted, we just wanted to make note of the existing features that are shown on the map. We noticed also on Google Maps and the survey that there's some existing infrastructure, including the housing, the parking area for the Superior Mortgage. The building and the business are to remain, as we understand it. There seems to be some old foundations with abandoned drums on them, which we request that the applicant advised as to whether there have been any environmental impacts from prior use that need to be further delved into. The parking area for Superior Mortgage is located on the applicant's property. So, we think that they should discuss what is proposed as far as that goes and if there's been any coordination with that business. And I think that's pretty much it for now.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Stu. I'll go ahead and I'll ask my next question. Go ahead.
Okay, well, this was initially very complicated, maybe still is, but Joe has straightened out a lot of the questions about what is actually being proposed to be rezoned. We, in our commentary, had suggested that there may be some significant changes to the plan when the density is recalculated, and Joe Fow has indicated that that is not likely to change. So I think we just want to verify that with the new proposed zone line and the density calculation are in sync. He's also indicated that I guess a formal petition will go to the village board for a zone change, zone map change, which we had commented upon. So he also clarified then a thing that was of concern to us is the extent and the boundary of the SH zone, the new proposed senior housing zone, and the fact that a portion of this property, which now we understand is no longer part of the proposed senior housing zone, is occupied by some of the mobile homes. Since that remains in the R2A zone, now I understand, the question that we raised on the second page, on the second paragraph, is no longer applicable because as Natalie pointed out, and we've pointed out, that in the SH zone, whatever is changed, the only use that's permitted is senior housing, so it wouldn't permit the mobile home parks. We have not done a detailed review of the site plan until we've resolved in our own minds, in your minds, the extent of the zoning and some of the questions that have been raised now. We do note that the plan, I don't think, in the calculations for the parking includes the employee or the superintendent's parking. We may or may not have missed it, but the applicant can straighten that out or confirm it. He also straightened out that we are going to have to have, the board is going to have a subdivision plan, and that, as I said, we will not be doing detailed review until we get any revisions to the plan and the zoning map. We have a section here on the density calculations and the net lot area question. Joe is going to reconfirm their calculation, and we'll review it again. The unit yield you're suggesting is going to remain the same. So our comments that it may come out differently, we thought that the EAF, which Dennis has raised some questions on, we thought might have some changes in it. So if there are no changes in the density or in the plan, we'll review the EAF again. I mentioned the parking calculations and the employee parking, the subdivision we said needs to be done. Then seeker, which is your next step, and you can proceed to declare your intent to be lead agency, but this will require a coordinated review. There will be, the village board will be a involved agency because of the zone change request. The DOT, I believe, because of the road openings onto Route 32. The DEC, there is I'm not sure if there's wetland that comes up to the front of this property. There's a lot of wetland on the rear of the property. So I think DEC and DOT, who else do we need? And of course, the village board. So the coordinated review can be taken care of as soon as, I think, as soon as we get a revised map that we can send out, and then the corrected EAF, which Natalie has mentioned. I think that's pretty much it. We have not, as I say, done a detailed review. We have picked up some items that need to be fixed in the plan, and we will do a more comprehensive review once the plan is, the zoning petition is made and the plan is revised.
Okay.
That's it, that's it.
Rick?
Just a couple of things. One, there's a lot going on in this property, and therefore, we're asking that all easements and deeds be submitted to our office as well as the building department so that we can analyze whether or not there are any restrictions that might, that should be taken into account, if at all possible, by the planning board in looking at the development of this lot. With respect to seeker, I agree with Stu that you can send out a notice of intent. I think you should type it as an unlisted action. But there's a problem here in the sense that, as I understand it, there's been no petition yet filed with the Board of Trustees to rezone the property. As such, as of this moment, they're not an involved agency. And so unless that petition is filed immediately, if this board circulates a notice of intent, when the Board of Trustees receives it, if they don't have a petition, as far as I'm concerned, I'd imagine that they would simply say, well, we have no involvement in this project, and the notice of intent may have to be recirculated. So I would suggest that you immediately submit a petition to the Board of Trustees to, for the rezone. It doesn't require any referral from this board whatsoever, but I think that that has to take place in order for you not to have a hiccup in the circulation of the notice of intent.
Rick, on that question, though, if the Board of Trustees has not rezoned the property, this is not a use that's permitted on the property at this point. So could the planning board still process the site plan, even if it's not a permitted use?
Yes, and that happens from time to time, where the use that's asked for is not yet done, where it needs both a zone change, which can't be done until completion of seeker, the zone change, and so it proceeds simultaneously, the site plan review and the consideration by the Board of Trustees for the zone change. The seeker has to be completed before either decision is made, but I think it'd be appropriate for it to go forward in that parallel basis.
Okay, but my question was, that answers part of my question or concern. But if there's no petition before the zoning board, the village board, it still could go simultaneously as if there was going to be...
No, I think if there's no petition, the board is not an involved agency, so that's why I said...
No, I understand that, but can this board do the site plan review if it's not zoned for this use? That's my point, I guess. Or
Well,
the intent
they can,
is not clear.
At the applicant's risk, they
Okay.
can go
Okay.
ahead and start the seeker on the representation that there will be something. Obviously, they could never approve anything that wasn't in compliance with the zoning. But I think the process here is that they should immediately file that petition for a rezone, which will allow the process to proceed simultaneously.
Okay.
Which we will do.
All right, we'll get to, anything else, Rick?
No.
All right. Board members, I'm sorry, but I'm going to jump in here first. I realize there's 5 lots that are mentioned in here. I presume, once the petition is to the village makes a determination that all these 5 lots will be joined into one lot?
No, 2 lots, because we're doing a 2-lot subdivision as well.
Okay, that's what I want to come back to. Rick, being that there's a 2-lot subdivision, they want to create a new lot. Do they have to put a separate application in for that, or can it be handled with this application? Because they want to do a subdivision of the main parcel to the south.
They need to submit a subdivision application with the building department.
Thank you, that's what I thought, because I did catch that before, I heard that. So the 5 lots, you're going to merge it into 2. And the new one is going to be, the second one is going to be a newly created lot. All right, so you'll do that application.
Yes.
Okay.
Maria, while you're on there, so the new lot is just going to be that one in yellow?
Correct.
And we don't need to know what the use is going to be because it's just, you're just requesting a subdivision.
Correct, and we'll show that it meets zoning as far as the bulk requirements.
We don't need to know what they're going to do.
No, I'm not going to ask that, but if, the part that you pointed down that's not in red, it's like that, right? That's part of one of those lots, correct?
It's part of the big lot.
Yeah.
So if all you're going to change to the SH district is in red,
Correct.
so you're going to have one lot and 2 different zoning.
Which is, well, it's currently that way. Right now, the upper parts of the LC and the bottom part is in the 2.0.
We need to keep it there because there are some trailers located there.
Well, that's going to be my next step because I was going to ask you, if you look at the property line, if you start up in the upper corner, it says property line easement. That's where there's the LC zone, the R1 zone, but that cuts through, that one's okay in the upper corner. But when you come down on the property line, I just lost the property line, you have where the recreational vehicle area is in your lower portion, correct?
Correct, and that's going to remain in the R2A zone.
All right, but what I'm getting at is, that, Rick, is where the largest easement, so now we're having, it's gonna stay R2 zone, but I haven't been down there, so I have no idea if there's still recreational vehicles there or if there are permanent homes in there. I need that clearly determined and cleared up for us as you get your easements and your deeds and all that.
Right, I think all of this, hopefully, will be made a lot clearer when they revise their plan,
Yep.
submit the easements and deeds, so we can determine how this board should look at this piece of property.
Because also, when you go further down, where there's homes that are numbers 72 and 73, one of the sheds or minor little buildings are in your lot down below. So I need to make sure that all these people that are currently living there are made aware that their property now, their whatever, is in someone else's, it's not their property, it's not in the.
Well, are the people there, are they owners? Are there different owners on this, or are they all renting?
I believe they're all renters, and none of them own the land.
So this applicant owns all, in fee, all of the pieces of
So
property?
the same applicant,
Yes, including the trailer park.
so the applicant owns the trailer park as well. All right,
Maria, can I just,
go ahead.
okay. According to Orange County tax information, the largest lot, the one that you want to change to SH, is a different ownership, same address, but a different ownership, Lakeside Affiliates LLC.
Yeah, there are, when you say the same owner, it's not technically correct, or different entities. Lakeside, as my recollection is, they are the owners.
Is that
of
listed on the owner authorization form?
I don't think we have one, do we?
Well, that
Needs
was
to be
my,
done.
Okay.
that was my next, I haven't gotten that far yet with the, that's okay, because you know how I am with the application. The application has a Highland Mills Center Group LLC, same as the applicant. We do have an LLC form which says Highland Mills Center Group LLC as the owner. But you're saying on the county tax maps, it's a different owner.
That big lot, that's the largest lot that's going to be in SH is Lakeside Affiliates LLC.
So I guess that needs to be cleared up.
We'll clarify that all.
Yep, they'll clarify it and they'll get that. If not, then we'll have to have a
We'll get it-
dual
we'll get it done by Monday.
applicant, all right? right, so that's it with the map. And the other thing is that being with 84 units, and you're gonna have senior housing, from when we first met, I like the layout. It's a little different, because you took into consideration the turning radiuses and whatnot. I am strongly concerned about only having one access in and one access out, even though we have an emergency access. Overall, our traffic consultant, we're gonna have to get Andrea involved on this. I need her, I don't know, whoever wants to, she needs to be contacted immediately. She needs to have copies of these plans. She needs to be brought in sooner than later. I want her to look at this. And then as we go forward with the traffic study and everything, if we can remind the building department, she needs to be included in all correspondence going forward with this project. Board members, you're okay with Andrea taking care of this one with the traffic study?
Yes.
Well, I am, but I also would like to know from our engineer whether or not similar projects of this size, because this isn't relatively a large project, do they normally require additional access other than emergency? There must be some things that have been created in other townships that can show us something to work from.
I'll have to confirm that with you.
And I'm sure,
For you.
and I'm sure Andrea will have some kind of a response, because being that she's done traffic studies, she might be, yes?
And also the DOT is gonna obviously
Dictate.
have
Yep.
they typically like to limit their access points, but
Understood on that, but being that this is such a project like this, I mean, you have the project across the street that's been there that has over 1,000 homes. They have 2 accesses, one at the bottom of 32, one on Ridge Road. And it's for safety purposes. I mean, if they're, that was something to look at, and I'll have my traffic consultant review that and take a look at that.
In regards to the access, the ESOs will also be notified for their
Yep,
opinion
we'll
as
have-
well.
Yeah, once we get something, we'll set up a meeting with them, and I'll review that with them. Being what Rick, our attorney, said, and what you're going to submit a letter to the Village Board of Trustees.
It's actually a petition more than a letter.
Petition.
They have to
Petition.
petition for a zone change.
Right, for a zone change. To keep things clean and clear, and this is just my feeling, I would like to wait till August 2nd to declare us our intent to be lead agency, so that everything is put in its proper order, so that you get your letter in tomorrow, Monday, to the village, at least it's in place. That's my feelings, is not to declare ourselves our intent to be lead agency tonight, but to wait until the letter is submitted from the village board. They can say, hey, planning board, we've got this. I just like to have it, keep it clear and clean. That's just my feeling. I don't know how the board feels about it.
I
Robert?
agree.
Sandy?
No, I agree.
Chris?
I have a question, and the question is regarding the petition to the town, to the village trustees. It's one thing to present a petition, but does that require a public hearing upon to have it approved?
No.
So timing could be as simple as one meeting.
Yeah,
Make approval to come.
the public hearing, there will be a public hearing required by the board, separate and apart unless we combine it, which it normally is combined with, if you do a public hearing in conjunction with seeker, then it will likely be combined with the Board of Trustees' required public hearing for a local law. If you're not doing a public hearing for seeker, and I'm not suggesting that it goes down this route one way or the other, but let's assume that you neg deck it next time, right? And you don't have a public hearing in connection with that. There's no requirement for you to combine subdivision public hearing with their local law public hearing, so they could be separate. However, if you're going to have seeker public hearing, then seeker requires or strongly suggests that it ought to be one public hearing for all of these events. Subdivision, site plan, zoning change, as well as a DEIS if we're going down that route. But with respect to the board, the petition has to be filed. Now, unless the Board of Trustees immediately rejects it, then there's a pending request for a zone change. Now they are an involved agency, and so they can take, they won't take any other action on it. They can't take any action on it, actually, until all of seeker is completed. And so they would have to wait until seeker is completed, and they would have to do a public hearing on the local law, either coordinated under seeker or uncoordinated public hearing just for the local law before they could ever adopt anything. but that would be later on. Right now, it just is introduced to them, they accept it, and unless they reject it right away, it'll be a pending request. And then, this is something that happens from time to time. Normally not so much on a smaller project like this, but on larger projects, it's rather regular in that they're going to go through seeker, which may be short, may be long. And at the end of seeker, and let's assume that they mitigate all of their aspects satisfactory to this board, and assuming this board is lead agency, it then will go to bounces back to the Board of Trustees to determine the zone change. They're not bound, they have very different criteria for whether or not they want to rezone. They could just say, we just don't think it's right to rezone, or they could rezone. But it's different criteria than your arbitrary and capricious standard on that. But they're going to be informed by seeker. They could say, no, we're not going to rezone for one reason or another. That will then end the project, and you will no longer take up the cause of going forward with the subdivision and site plan finalization approvals.
Is there any advantage to the applicant to have the direction from us now versus August 2nd?
Yes. There's 2 points. One is we would like to get before the village board and get a preliminary, whatever we can glean from them as to issues and concerns, so that if there are things we need to address, we can address them. And if the village board is not looking to do this, we can know that, and we can, not waste anyone's time. The other point is, if you declare lead agency now, you have to wait 30 days until the other agencies respond. So if you wait until August 2nd, then that's September. If you do it now, it's sometime, it's mid-August. The significance of that is, we know there's a village board meeting next week. We will submit a petition on Monday, maybe sooner if we can, to have that before the board at that meeting. I think they're going to get both things at the meeting, so I don't see that.
I don't know whether or not they're going to put it on the agenda if they don't get a petition until Monday.
Sure. They may not put it on the agenda. They may defer their decision about whether or not to agree to lead agency until their second meeting, or the first meeting in August. But the sooner we can get that accomplished, the better. And we may get comments from the village board at the next July meeting. We may get it at one of the August meetings, or we may have to wait until they schedule a public hearing. I don't know, but if we don't, the sooner we start, the sooner we find out.
George, excuse me. Let's assume that the board declares their intent to be lead agency now, then the notice won't go out until there is a revised map or, to send out.
Joe is prepared to work all weekend.
I realize that, but that's still Monday then. So it's Monday, so, okay. I mean,
Okay.
we're losing.
All right. Chris, any other thoughts, concerns?
Just trying to understand the downside for us by delaying this, by not delaying this or delaying it.
Well, I stated my
Okay, well,
feelings about it, and
all right,
that's,
I disagree. I
Okay.
would like to do it now.
Rich?
The only question I have for Rick is, this is kind of unique application, at least since I've been on the planning boards, going for a SH zone change. I don't recall having done that before.
There's never
So
been one before.
It's never. Okay. So I don't know how different it is than building a traditional apartment building and what restrictions there are. I'm just looking at Dennis's memo here, and it says they want to build 3-story, 1-bedroom. So I guess that's that's what's being proposed to the village, being that you don't have a site plan. You're just proposing that, a 3-story senior citizen, right?
We have a proposal, which is shown on this plan.
Yeah.
It's not given site plan approval, obviously, but
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Here's my question. If they get that approval for the 3-story, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and then they come back and say there's no market for that, can they change that to a higher size building, 3 to 4 bedroom? What has to happen?
The SH zone has limits, what can happen. There are criteria, bulk requirements, which I believe are 3 stories, and no unit over 2 bedrooms.
Okay.
And
Yeah, like I
being-
said, we
and-
haven't done it.
And,
And
and
the-
so if somebody came back and said, I want to build a market rate, non-senior housing, they couldn't do that.
Okay.
And the law has recently been changed. I need a copy of that revision of the law. I need to read that law in its entirety. Not, I read it piecemeal with the old law and some of the changes. So I even need to see the complete law in my hands.
What's that? A copy of the law?
We cannot accept anything at the meeting, you know that.
Okay.
So that can go to the secretary, and I will get it from our village clerk. That's my request. That's the route I would like to go through with our building department. Rich, so
I don't have.
you're okay with,
So I ask-
yes or no to wait till the August 2nd meeting?
Yeah, I'd rather wait and find out what happens at the village meeting.
All right, so I guess we have 4 say yes and 1 says no. Do we need to make a motion, Rick, to hold off to our next meeting?
It's not required, but I think it would be good form so that it's on the record exactly how the board made its determination, because there's been some discussion after some of the initial ones. So I think a motion would be in order to go ahead and postpone the initial determinations of seeker until after a rezone petition is filed with the Board of Trustees. That can be seconded, any further discussion, and then it can be voted on, and you'll know which way you're going.
Gail, I know you're so great at this. That's my motion that I just made. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. All right, so that's one thing on that.
So that's the August 2nd meeting, is that
That's in 2 weeks from tonight.
the 2nd?
That's 2 weeks from tonight. That gives you until, I would say Friday, I would probably get the information to the village board so that they put their agenda together, I think on Monday morning, if not sooner. And that's if the mayor decides to put it on their agenda. I know you have a representative sitting in the room right now, and I'm sure a conversation will be had. So the sooner you can get to the village clerk's office and to the mayor, they can handle what they need to do on their end, and then we can, as long as you put that letter of petition in, then it can be stamped in and we can get a copy of it. So,
Yeah, because this board needs it, obviously, because if in fact it plays out as it normally does, this board will be lead agency for the environmental review for both the local law rezone as well as your subdivision site plan, et cetera. So that you need a copy of that local law because you're going to be considering the environmental impacts of that local law.
all right, Rick, I'm going to put this to you, that if you can reach out to the village mayor and just let them know what has occurred tonight and let them be aware of the potential of them receiving a petition, just so they understand what we've discussed tonight? Or do you want Dennis's office to do that?
Well, we normally do it through Dennis's office. If you want
Okay.
me to do it, I can do it. But I think Natalie can do it and
Okay.
she's already notifying Maria about some things with respect to getting a copy of the local law, et cetera. And she can also notify the Board of Trustees, the mayor and Board of Trustees as to what has occurred at tonight's meeting so that the mayor and Board of Trustees are aware of that.
I think it might be appropriate, unless Rick disagrees, to, in the same effort, to suggest to the village board that they refer the matter to the planning board and ask them to assume lead agency. Is that appropriate?
I think what can be done similar to that, I think what should be done is, I think it's difficult to ask a board to defer to a involved agency that hasn't noticed its intent to be lead agency, but I think that given what I think is the board's consensus that it would like to be lead agency on this matter, is that in the notification by Natalie to the board can indicate that the planning board, although it has not circulated yet a notice of intent because there was no petition, that the planning board
Is willing.
desires to be lead agency in this matter, or is willing to be lead agency in this matter.
Okay, as long as they say it.
Go ahead, Natalie.
We will include all of that in our notification to the village board.
Thank you. And you'll also let Maria know about the traffic. You'll also let Maria know about the traffic involvement that we're requesting.
Absolutely.
So Maria will ask,
Maria Rubio will contact the traffic.
Andrea
Yep.
to do, okay.
And to make sure she gets everything. And then, as we go further along, Natalie, we'll get together, your office and me, we'll set up a ESO meeting sooner than later, just so we can hash out everything with the ambulance, fire, and police. Okay?
So what,
What am I forgetting here, Rick?
I don't think you're forgetting
No,
anything.
I don't think,
So we're good right now until,
I assume just for your own notes and Natalie and Dennis's notes is that it's likely that this should be listed as a potential matter for your next agenda so that you can take up the matter of a notice of intent.
okay. Yes, please note for, all right.
consider it lead agency.
Joe or Mr. Litko, anything else you want to give the board?
just one point of clarification, when you are meeting with the SOs, will we have an opportunity to attend?
Oh, of course. Oh, yes, yes. As usual, that's our, yeah, no, usually, H2M takes care of that. She'll include Joe
Just
and-
wanted to check.
Yep, no problem. I would never leave you out of that. All right, so we'll see you on the
August
2nd,
2nd.
in 2 weeks from tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Me too.
Have a good night. All right, so the next item on the agenda is Needham/Millvale Lane, review and discuss revised site plan and additional documents submitted for proposed construction of local community shul with mikveh on a property located in the R2A zoning district and is located at 83 Millvale Lane in Highland Mills. Said property is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 213, Block 1, Lot 85. Just give me a moment to get my file together. Good night, we'll see you soon. Okay. Since our last meeting, which was February 1st of 2017, a lot of correspondence was held between our attorney's office, Rick Golden, and the law firm representing the applicant. Rick, do you want to give us a short summary of all
Sure.
that occurred between that?
Yeah, there was a letter drafted by counsel for the applicant with respect to the requested waiver by this board, and presenting that it satisfied the requirement under the waiver provision of the code, which is similar to RLUIPA, if not identical, with respect to whether or not it presented a substantial burden. I had discussions with counsel and believe that it didn't quite meet that in how I looked at it and was going to advise the board. And so he asked if he could write a supplemental letter. He did draft that supplemental letter and sent it to me on June 6th. As I found out this morning, that was also not sent to the building department. I didn't follow up to ensure that it was. And so when I discovered today that it was not with the building department and the other consultants in the planning board didn't have it, I quickly forwarded it to the building department and was circulated only today with respect to it. But what is requested there are some things that are for your board to determine as to whether or not it's a substantial burden based upon various facts. There are also some legal issues that are intertwined with that, so that if there's certain facts that are presented from a legal point of view, the board cannot act except in one fashion, in my opinion. and I'd so advise the board. There are 3 waivers that are being requested, and council's letters on that point and my response letter in between are relevant to that. With respect to the lot size and the lot width, because they cannot really change, that if they do not get those waivers or variance, then it would be a per se substantial burden because they could not go forward with their application. And so my advice to the board is that with respect to both of those issues of lot size and lot width, that they have demonstrated from a legal point of view that they're entitled to those waivers. The third and final waiver request is with respect to parking. That doesn't quite fall into the same category, in my opinion, as being something that's absolute. They have problems with providing all the parking on the site. They also are in a situation where they are willing to have much less parking on the site because they have represented that it's only going to be used at certain times in which the congregation is going to go ahead and walk because it's part of their religious dogma that they ought not to be driving on those occasions. I think some of that, and Stu raised this issue about whether or not that applies to all of the times that it may be utilized or only as to certain times that it may be utilized. So I think we need to flesh out some of that, and then based upon those answers, you will have to determine whether or not it would be a substantial burden if they would have to put in additional parking. And so you have the ability, in my opinion, to make that determination and make a determination as to how many parking spaces are required, because you have the ability not only to waive something absolutely, but waive it partially. And so I think that's still an open question for you, is with respect to the parking. So that's basically a summary of the legal aspects and the letters going back and forth.
Thank you. Representative for the applicant, if you'd like to state your name for the record and give us a brief overview.
Sure. I'm Gardner Barone, attorney with the firm of Bluestein, Shapiro, Rich, and Barone, the author of the 3 letters that have been submitted to your attorney, Rick Golden. I can't stand up here and give you the nuances and particulars of the engineering components, nor can I fully educate you on, as Mr. Golden says, the religious dogma or religious practices of my clients. But I can talk about RLUIPA, and I agree with Mr. Golden on his 2 points. Points 1 being lot size and lot width. Not much we can do about that. We're stuck with it. The other aspect is parking. Your code requires, as I understand it, and I don't do these computations, but as I understand it, we're required under the code for this type of use to provide 20 parking spaces. We show a total of 4, 2 for the residents, 2 for the religious use. My understanding of why, and our engineer can explain this in more detail, but my understanding of why we picked 4 and not 5, not 6, not 8 or more was a function of a few dynamics. The lot configuration, the topography, those aspects that also this is a built-up residential area and that we don't want to be creating a large parking lot amongst all these other residences, that we want our shul mikvah to blend in with what exists there. And then the other consideration is there certainly becomes a tipping point at which we can't afford to build, a 20-some space parking lot with curbing and lighting and, all of those features if that's what you're asking for. So based upon your council's guidance, we would like to know what your opinion or outlook is in terms of what you think fits on this site in terms of parking and what we should provide, and then for us to price that and see if it's something that we can afford. And if not, then we have to address that as part of the substantial burden component. So with that said, of course, I can answer your questions on my end of the spectrum, and then we have our engineer as well to go over the engineering dynamics.
I'd like to just respond to what council has stated. My advice to the board is that whether or not it's a substantial burden is not an economic one, except in the most extreme cases. And therefore, whether or not they can afford the aspect of it, I think is not something that you ought to take into consideration. However, there are physical constraints on the property, and the engineer, I think, can refer to that. I don't think that they can physically fit 20 spaces on that property. And so it becomes a matter of how many can they fit physically. Beyond that, you'd be in the same category, as I said before, of a per se violation. But let's assume that it can hold 6 spaces, but they only want 4 spaces, and they want them for the purposes that they've said. I think then you're talking about you deciding whether or not 4 spaces or 6 spaces is appropriate with, for purposes of waiving the 20-space requirement. But my advice to you is that you ought not to consider simply the cost, that the cost is a burden. The cost certainly may well be a burden. I'm not minimizing that at all. But in my opinion, it's not part of your analysis as to whether or not there is a substantial burden in accordance with the code in order for you to waive something.
Right, well, we probably
you.
don't have to address
Okay.
that tonight because, you may not want more than 4 parking spaces.
Well,
So-
I'm just going to refer back to our February 1st meeting. John Queenan was here, and we did discuss about the need for 22 parking spots and that they would have 5. And I forgot what the board, we went back and forth, and I knew we had to, I thought we're coming to some kind of a consensus about waiving the parking with the intent. But the number 5, I have written down in here as a number that we were discussing that night. So at this point, I'd like Mr. Queenan
Good
to
evening.
give a brief overview, and then we'll, as usual customary, I'll go through my consultants.
Sure. Good evening, John Queenan from Lankin Tully, engineer for the applicant. As the chairwoman exactly put, that's exactly what happened in February. Our original plan had 5 parking spaces, and we were basically redoing the well, taking out the old well, putting in a new well. We had some grading issues. So we took a new look at that because one of the concerns of the board at the February meeting was you kind of wanted this to blend in a little bit better to the neighborhood and rather than look like a parking lot in front of a residential house. So what we did was we came up with an alternative design that reduced it from 5 spaces to 4 spaces. And what that did was that saves the existing well, so we can utilize the existing well on the property without having to drill a new well. But it also puts us back to the original driveway location that currently exists now, so we wouldn't be changing any of the street dynamics and the turning radiuses or anything that exists. And it also saves the landscaping. There were several large trees that were right along the property line. So by doing the 4 spaces, we were able to push off the property line a little bit. We can retain those trees at the corner. We also eliminated the parking in the blacktop that would be located in front of the house, because the original design had 2 parking spaces this way and 2 parking spaces across the front of the house. So by going to the 4 spaces, we were able to align the parking with the shul, eliminate the parking in front of the house, and also provide better pedestrian access to the shul by having a hatched handicap space so that the people walking to the shul can go right to the door. So we feel that was a much better layout. It also reduced the imperviousness by about 20% along on the property there. So that's where we come to today. So we'll be asking, we need 22 spaces, 2 for the residential house and 20 for the shul based on a number of 60 seats that we're proposing. So we're asking for 4. We figured 2 for the residential house, which meets your code, and 2 for the shul. That would be for if there was a maintenance vehicle that needed to come to the shul, or the manager would have to come. Because as we've said before in the narrative, the shul is only going to be used on Fridays and Saturdays, and on the high holidays, and at those times, the members that'll be walking to this facility are local, they won't be driving. So there really wouldn't be a need for the 20 parking spaces. Also, constraint-wise on the site, we could fit more parking, but we would have to extend the parking across the front, probably put an access road along the side and create more parking down the side. And that would basically pave the entire frontage and side of the lot. We want to retain that residential look to the lot. We don't want it to make it seem like it's out of place in the existing neighborhood. So that's why we chose that. Keep it to the existing driveway, keep the parking to where the old driveway was, limit the 4 spaces, which we believe is suitable for our needs, and reduces the imperviousness of the site. It also reduces, there would be a significant cut involved with creating more parking, and you'd have parking going across the front yard of the house. That's kind of how we ended up where we are with the parking layout and the number tonight.
Thank you. That's it?
On the parking, sure.
Well,
I can keep going to tell you the other plan changes if you
that-
want to get.
please do.
Sure. Since that time, we retained the existing well. We've had the well pump tested and quality tested at the end of June. I'm just awaiting the results of that report, which I said were more than adequate for our needs. We will submit that for Natalie and Dennis's review. We also did our septic system soil testing with the building department. We have our perks and our deeps. We have a full system design. As you may recall, we're abandoning the old system completely. We are installing a new septic system for both uses on the site, so we feel that that should adequately cover any of the septic issues. We've also redone the drainage, putting in a small rain garden on the side here to attenuate any of the runoff from the shul and from the parking area. So we feel we brought this up. We've addressed landscaping and lighting comments as well on the plan. We have gotten some additional comments, which we can go through. I don't see any major stumbling blocks, just some technical details back and forth. I was in contact with the Orange County Department of Health today, who will be providing correspondence that their office does not have jurisdiction nor requires any approvals for this, and that anything in regards to water and sewer is a local review and approval. Thank
That's
you.
it?
That's it.
Okay. Natalie?
So in regards to the waivers requested for lot area and lot width, I think Attorney Golden and the applicant have both gave their opinion, and that's up to the board to determine if it's satisfactory. With regards to the parking, you have some discretion. Again, the applicant has advised that they can adjust it to increase the spaces, but it may be your opinion that it is a residential area and perhaps less would be appropriate. You may wish to consider that as a part of your resolution, the parking, you can put some conditions on that as well. Again, that's to your discretion. The applicant has advised that the water and sewer testing results will be available. We look forward to receiving them for the review and adequacy. As far as the septic system disposal, we believe that the approval of that would be municipal, but they may want to confirm that the DOH with the DOH. As far as site distances are concerned, the applicant has advised that they are matching the existing driveways. However, the right turning exit site is approximately 90 feet less than what is required by AASHTO, and perhaps they should discuss whether or not they can adjust that to provide a better site distance in that entry and exit way.
But isn't that currently there now? It's an existing condition, right, Rick?
An existing
With the driveway?
nonconformity.
It is existing, but I think that this is a site plan application, and if in fact you believe that it's necessary to have some alteration in that because of a much greater use than what presently exists, you have the ability to consider that. It may be that you decide that you're going to go ahead and do it, but it's not something that's a pre-existing non-conforming use or anything. This is a driveway, and Natalie's suggesting that maybe some modification is necessary for safety purposes, and you have the ability to consider that.
If I may, we did look at the site distance, and the location, the existing location is the most we can get for the frontage on the property. If we start to move up the hill, we actually get less site distance.
Okay. All right, Natalie.
Okay. In regards to the hours of operation that the applicant has proposed in their project narrative on November 30th, 2016, the applicant provides the days and general hours of service. We would suggest that you consider those with the compatibility and a residential use in the area. For lighting, they have limited the glare and illumination at the property line to 0.1-foot candles. However, we just suggest that with the wall pack fixtures, they should include some shields and show that on the plan. Okay. Additionally, ARB and ridge preservation will be required for this application. It's above the elevation of 600 feet. And the applicant has indicated that they will submit the plans and elevations required for that, but we haven't received them to date, and we think that that's an important part of the review. Everything else is minor details, and we can go over that if the board deems appropriate.
Can you do me a favor? Can you send a copy of the report to the Highway Department, please, since it's you have the police, building, and fire, but I think you need to add the Highway Department so they're aware of it on the referrals.
Will do.
Thank you. Stu?
Okay, our memo has addressed a number of the items that have been discussed already, and we do have some concern about this parking question. I'll lay them out, and the applicant and you can discuss them. We recognize that we don't want to, you don't want to change the character of the neighborhood, and you don't want to necessarily have a large parking area. And we also understand how the shul and the mikveh will function. It's a limited shul because as the applicant has testified, it will be used only on the Sabbath and the high holidays. And that gets to the question of the parking then. It's not clear, the applicant has indicated the mikveh will be used on Friday afternoon, during which time people are not prohibited from driving. We don't know the actual capacity or how many people will be using the mikveh at any one time. So I would raise the question that there may be a need for more than two extra parking spaces. The building and the shul will, according to the applicant, will not be used for any other function other than religious worship. So that can be something that you may want to consider as a condition that they've testified to that, and that would be the restriction, because it's conceivable while there may not be offices or other activities, there could be opportunities for periods when there may be things like discussion groups or educational discussions, et cetera, which may be at times when people can drive. And I think you just may want to have that discussion. We also pointed out, as Natalie has indicated, though the applicant does have to address ridge preservation and the architectural review. We haven't seen any submittals at this point. And Mr. Queenan indicated in his material that it would be coming in subsequently. They have filed under seeker and environment. They have filed a report from their environmentalists, and there is one condition that the applicant themselves had recommended that may be appropriate. That note should be added to the plan for barriers to deal with the potential for timber rattlesnakes. You've already done a lead agency, you assumed lead agency. You classified the action and assumed lead agency in November of 2016, November 2nd. So you've started the seeker process. And I think you had classified the action as unlisted. It's a little bit gray because it's a relatively small building, non-residential in nature, but it's got some complicating factors. So you did classify it as unlisted. So you've done that already. And that's basically, the applicant has clarified most of the questions we had asked earlier. They added a landscape plan. And, since the site will have limited use, it should, the lighting and so on should not be a problem in the neighborhood. And I think you've heard all the other concerns. It's basically the off hours that the site may be used and may require some additional parking. But I would agree with the applicant, and you'll have to make your own determination, that trying to provide a significantly larger parking area may not be appropriate. Our calculation was a little different. I don't know if we misread something. Mr. Queenan indicated they base it on 60 seats. I thought we had a requirement for 12 spaces based on 30 seats or 30-some seats. I think they were permanent seats. So I don't know if that, but whatever the number is, the requirement is more than is being provided. But the sanctuary will not draw traffic because it will only be used during the Sabbath and during the high holidays. That's all I have.
Thank you. Rick?
I just have two other minor points. I'd have to review it again, but I have a note here that the original application was signed by a different owner and applicant, and the new site plan has a particular single owner and applicant. You need to reconcile that and make sure that the application, if it needs to be amended, needs to be amended, and you have to have an owner authorization for all the owners.
I thought we did, but we'll.
Okay. The other thing is that, and Dennis had raised this, and I'm really going to throw it back at Natalie, that there is potentially a new entry room, and Dennis has deferred to us as to whether or not that's relevant, but I think it's more with respect to Gary as to whether or not that's something that he would normally issue just a building permit for.
They've actually
take that out?
eliminated that from
they
their,
did?
their
Okay.
new site plan.
All right, I missed that. Okay, thank you.
Chris, thoughts, concerns, questions?
No, I'm good.
Rich?
Yeah, I would have a problem waiving all three bulk requirements, specifically the parking, and, I mean, there's no room to add a few more in the back of the house? And my reason is, I remember when it was defined what a shoal and mifra was, it was a document that they said there could be people visiting from out of town that would be able to attend. So, again, where would they park? That would be a concern of mine. I wouldn't want them on the street because it's residential, kind of private. So my question is, there's no space to add a couple more in the back?
Well, I'll start with the parking. We certainly could add more, but what you're going to have to add is another driveway cut and another road coming in through the side in order to get to that parking. Or we would have to extend this parking lot across the front. So what I'm saying is if we wanted to put more parking, we could provide more parking over on the side yard here, but we'd have to access it some,
Where is the road? I'm confused.
right here.
But the house,
This-
is that the
this-
house there?
This is the house right here.
Okay.
So and our existing driveway comes in right here. So we're going to utilize that driveway, and then we open up to that parking area here. We could extend this road, we have to access it, we could bring a road across and have parking over here, or we could extend the parking lot across the front to get another space or two. It just, it seems like,
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was up there. If you're looking at the house, from Millvale Lane, you're looking at the house. If you go to the left of the house, where the shul is going to be built, there's quite a bit of a drop. I don't know how much of a drop there is.
It's about
steep.
from.
It's a steep drop.
From the road to the proposed shul, it's a 4-foot drop, and then from the shul to the back of the property, it's a 10-foot drop.
And that's
So,
kind of
all
steep.
totaled, it's 14.
And if you go to the other side of the house, I believe it's the same.
It's worse, because
It's
you're getting
worse.
higher, you're getting
It's
worse.
worse. I'm just gonna, I grew up in a residential neighborhood, and we happen to be at a dead end of the development. When, I know this is different, but when people would come to visit, family would come to visit, the driveways were never large enough for families to visit. We parked on the roads. And we always were courteous to the neighbors, say, hey, we're having a party, this is what's happening. This is not a party, this is a gathering for religious uses. As it was stated that from what I remember vaguely from the prior meetings, if family members were to come to visit, it might be 1 or 2 cars. It wouldn't be that many cars that would park on the site. But you would have neighboring residences that would come walking to the services.
correct.
Am I still?
Yes, no,
on
if
that?
visitors do come, they're already at whoever they're visiting's house, so that their vehicle is at their house.
That's what I need to clarify.
Yeah,
So-
they still can't drive
Right,
to the service.
So maybe 2 houses down the road, you might
Correct.
have a family that have visiting family come in, they would park on their driveway.
Correct.
And then on the holiday or your Sabbath,
they-
they'd be walking.
That's
I just
correct.
want to clarify that.
Yes.
That even though we state that we have 22 spots are required, we have the right to waive it. But to me, to take the front of the house and plow it down and put an additional driveway, you're taking away a residential appeal and put it on the side of the house, to me, you're disturbing natural resources that can't reclaim what needs to be reclaimed. That's just my feeling, Rich. And to me, if you want to keep it residential in the front, you don't want to put a whole parking lot in the front of the house, because then, to me, we're not doing due diligence in making the rest of the neighborhood look decent. But that's just my opinion on that. But if everyone should go up there and take a look at where the property is, because it is steep. And to put I forget what Natalie, you can help me, what is the slope threshold for a driveway? Is it 14 feet, 10 feet? Because I know once you start going higher and higher, it's steep.
I'm not honestly, I'd have to just double
Yeah.
check that for you for the exact amount, but that is excessive.
It is excessive. And then I know in other over prior years, when someone had a steep driveway, we had them put bank curves in there so no one would go flying down the road, from the driveway into a road. So this is something I want the board members to take into consideration as well. If we put all driveway and take away and put have the side in, could we be causing a potential with what's it, not the step, the slope, thank you, couldn't think of the right word, I was mixing the two together. So this is something the board members to take into consideration. On that note, I will let you continue, Rich.
No, I'm good.
If I could also I just want to expand upon the use of the mikvah. This is a local shul, so it's really used by only the residents in the local neighborhood here, and there's 24 members currently. So the mikvah is used prior to the Sabbath services. It's not used after that during the week because this is a local shul, so it's not really used during the week until you get to Friday and Saturday. So that's when the mikvah is used.
Except holy days.
And the high holy holidays, correct.
Okay.
During the week, my understanding is that they'll use the larger mikvahs in the village because they're able to drive and they're able to get around. They don't use the local shuls or mikvahs during the week. So, and that's what this is really for, is the local neighborhood. So there won't be an increase, say, on a Tuesday of 100 people coming to use this mikvah because it won't be open because they'll use the main mikvahs. And on the Sabbath, since they can't drive, driving is not allowed, they stay to the local shuls, that's the reason, rather than going to the larger ones in the village.
Okay. I understand all that, but I have a question. I thought there was stated a library and a study section, and I understand that's part of the religious method of, for the Sabbath and all that. And I'm just going to throw this out here, Rick, stop me when you can. During the week, or when there's non-holidays, can there be a restriction that you can't have a massive parking out there. You can't have a gathering, or you can't have a study group coming in. I don't know if that's permissible with what we're dealing with. But how do we protect the neighborhood during the week or non-holy days to prevent a mass parking on the streets or other people coming in to share in this religious entity?
Well,
I'm just-
you're
Rick?
talking about the use of the property for other than the shul and the mikveh?
Let's say they wanted to do, and I'm just throwing this out there, a group study. And they wanted to study something on a particular item. And it was on a Tuesday afternoon. And people drove to come here. You could have 30 cars come in, one person a
Okay.
car. I'm just,
Right now, the applicant has stated that the shul and the mikveh can only be used on Saturdays, high holidays, as noted in the narrative.
okay.
Friday.
So
What
we
you're
can-
bringing up is a good point, and that is, other than the use of the shul and the mikveh, is that structure or those structures put together, are there any plans to use that for any other purposes? Because if so, this board needs to hear that because it affects whether or not there's a need for more parking, et cetera.
Correct, at this time, no.
Okay, so there can be a condition. Obviously, you can always come back to ask for
To change it.
Correct.
modifications. But for this, then, just so that it's very clear, there's going to be a condition that says that it can only be used for the shul and the mikveh. I guess it's a residence as well there, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and the residence, but there can be no use for public gatherings or religious events other than those times.
That, the applicant would be fine with that.
Okay.
Okay. Chris, did I ask if you had any thoughts, concerns? I did. You said nothing.
No,
You passed.
I'm good.
Okay.
I didn't pass, I just said I'm good with it.
Okay. Rich, you're okay now? I'll go on to Sandy.
With the, Mr. Queenan? With the change in ownership, is it still the thought that the residence is going to be inhabited by the rabbi?
That's correct.
So that's still,
Yes. And the same, I don't know if maybe it was crossed, the same owner and applicant is been the same the whole time, but,
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
so, maybe there was a cross in the applications, but it's still going to be inhabited by the rabbi.
Okay, so 2 of the 4 parking spaces are for the rabbi and his family.
That's correct.
Anything else? Robert?
The mikveh would be used on a Friday by the residents, correct? But how many would be using that as far as the men using it?
There's 24 male members.
Right.
So those, that's the number that would be using the mikveh.
I'm concerned, like, with foul weather and winter and so forth, that they'd be more apt to drive or maybe carpool. So I think 2 is inadequate. Maybe you can increase it to a decent, reasonable number, maybe
Well, they
6.
they're forbidden to drive on those days.
Can they drive on Friday? It says Friday afternoon. Is that part of the Sabbath?
Yeah, they wouldn't take their car because they'd have to leave it there.
So the Sabbath begins at sundown, right?
Correct.
All right.
So my understanding is they use the mikveh and then they go into services.
So they would go, so let's say sundown is at 6, they would go
Yeah.
at 4, and then 6 o'clock would come, then they can't get in their car and drive home.
Right.
So I guess,
Okay.
I'm just using
That's-
times.
No, that's correct. And then
Okay.
during the week, it won't be used just because it's a local shul and they'll use the
They
mikveh.
go elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Correct.
just-
All right.
They don't tend to
Yeah.
go early either.
Excuse me? Okay. Anything else?
No.
Good? All right. What's our
Uh,
next step? Do we have to have? a-
Excuse me, the applicant just wants to make comment?
Sure.
This is Nathan Brock, representative for the applicant.
Okay.
Hi. I just want to clarify the weekday, because during the week, everybody gets up at a different time, and it's very hard to put together, because you need to do a prayer, you would need like 10 people because of religious needs, and so during the week, everybody gets up at a different time, they go to work at a different time, and also to point out, to keep up a mikveh for a full week, it would be very expensive, and there's no way they can even afford it, even if they'd want to. So like keeping the towels up and everything else, it's like almost like, so it's like very far-fetched it should ever happen, something like that. Both the use and of the shul and the mikvah. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, what's our next step? I'm starting to fade here, I'm sorry.
There's a public hearing that's required, right?
We have to waive the.
What?
All right, so do we need to, any public hearings needed?
Yes, there's a public
Okay.
hearing that's needed. I believe the 239 referrals were sent,
They were sent
and they were
in-
also received back
Yep.
that there was no impact. You need to complete seeker. You can do that now, or you can wait until after the public hearing.
And the waive,
And Stu said, what else are they waiting for?
We're waiting for the ARB for elevation. At least I haven't seen one, or we haven't seen one.
It's in the
And
ridge preservation, right?
And the ridge preservation, right?
Correct. The
Okay.
applicant was waiting to get kind of a direction before we went down that road, full architecturals and
Okay.
renderings.
all right, so let's start the easy one first. We did declare this an unlisted action in November.
Yes.
So we're going to declare ourselves lead agency.
No, you did that already. You did that.
I only have unlisted action. I don't have lead agency written down for some reason. That's why I want to make sure.
I have November 2nd, 2016, you assume lead agency and typed it as unlisted.
Because I never wrote it down. Did you write it down?
No.
That's why I'm not 100%. See, the two of us only wrote down
It's on
unlisted
the
action.
Golden Turner minutes.
All right, well, we'll check it. We'll check
Thank you.
We'll check
Just-
the
all right.
minutes.
Just
and-
check. All
And
right.
if it wasn't done, you'll do it at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Because if the two of us didn't write it, there's a,
There's a reason.
okay.
Nice, well,
All right,
yeah.
board members, do we have a motion to waive the parking to the 4 proposals? Before I even go there, do you want to discuss it?
I'll make that motion.
To waive,
To waive the 22 parking space requirement and accept the plans with the 4 spaces as presented this evening.
all right, so that's by Chris. Do I have a second? I'll second. Excuse
Can I
me?
just have, just for clarification,
Yes.
for purposes of the resolution, et cetera, you are waiving the parking requirements that otherwise obtain down to 4? Is that the motion?
Correct.
Okay.
Chris made the motion, I made the second. Any discussion?
I have,
Go ahead.
does this have to be done before the public hearing? Or can this be done after the public hearing?
It can be done either before or after the public hearing.
Okay, I mean, I would like to hear the public's feeling, the residents in that area, as to whether they would like to see a parking lot in the front, or they're good with it being, looking as much like a residence as possible. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, with that being said, when we go to public hearing, they're going to have the proposal that they're showing with us, so the residents will not see an alternate version of how the parking would look, because this is the plan that they're giving to us to go forward with. So there would be no alternate version to present to the public. Am I, how would we do that, Rick?
You could, this is their plan, and the
Yeah.
public can comment on this plan, and the public can say, well, we think you should have more parking. And you take that into consideration, and then the board would make its determination after the close of the public hearing.
Okay.
You don't need an alternate plan for the public.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye.
No?
This is, wait a second, I'm confused now.
This was the waiver of the 22 parking to 4 spaces.
Right,
There was
and
the motion.
everybody-
There's a motion, second discussion, and,
And now everybody voted yes?
no, Sandy,
Oh, I didn't, I
Who
only
voted
heard
no?
yeses.
were waiting till after the public hearing.
no.
That's what you're voting on now is,
That was her discussion, but call the vote and start over again.
the vote is, just to make it clear for the record, the vote is to waive at this time the parking down to 4 spots. That's what the motion is. And now the vote will take place on whether to agree to that now or not.
Robert?
Let me just get this straight. So we're voting on the
I'm vo-
waiver now?
Yes, based
Yes.
on the
Okay.
plan that they're
I
proposing.
would agree with Sandy, I would prefer after the public hearing.
So you're
So you're voting
saying,
no.
so you're
Yes,
voting
no,
no?
Voting no.
no.
Sandy?
No.
Chris?
Yes.
Rich? I vote yes, motion fails. So the waiver fails, so we would have to wait till the public hearing. ARB, are you gonna get something to us so that we can schedule a hearing that shows the ARB with, because I know there's construction going up there right now, and I know that's with the building department.
Correct. And
Do you, how soon do you feel that you'll get the floor plan, the elevations, and everything put together? Because you can't do it for the next meeting, that's for certain. Because you have to have it in, you would have to have it in by,
well, when would the public hearing be?
it's not gonna be August 2nd, I can guarantee you that, because we
Yeah,
need.
no, we wouldn't have it in time.
All right. We could push it back to the 16th or the first meeting in September, which would be Friday's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, I think it's the 6th.
We
It'd
could-
either be-
we could have the renderings by the 16th for that deadline, which would be.
Which would
the
be-
2nd.
Correct, you'd have to have it in by the 2nd
Correct.
to be on for the 16th.
Yeah,
If we do that,
correct. Yes. He's the one drawing them. He says he can have them, we'll have them.
all right. So I'll make a motion that we schedule a public hearing for August 16th.
I'll second.
This is to have the public hearing and the ARB review.
It's for both, it's the site plan.
Site plan.
As well as ARB.
Yes. On August 16th. So I have made a motion, Sandy seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that was done. Seeker going to wait, waiver, and the
I-
DRP. Yes, Rick?
Given the advice you've gotten from me with respect to the waiver on the lot area and lot width, I think it probably would be appropriate for you to make a determination with respect to those waivers now.
Yep. And you said yes to both?
Yes,
That was-
in my opinion, and my advice to the board
Okay.
is that, given the configuration of the site, that, and the fact that it cannot be built unless there are waivers for both the lot width and the lot area to what it exists right now, it would be a per se substantial burden, and therefore they're entitled to a waiver.
Okay,
That means, that's my advice to you, but you still need to make that determination that a waiver is appropriate.
Just so that the public understands, Rick, we're waiving them having to go to the ZBA for a variance.
That's correct.
Okay.
As provided in your code, that you have the ability to waive things upon a substantial burden. So they're not, I take it back. I probably shouldn't characterize it as that you're waiving the need for a variance. They have the right to either go for a variance, or they have a right to ask you for a waiver if they can prove a substantial burden. They have decided to ask you for a waiver because of a substantial burden. I have advised you that legally, they have a per se substantial burden, and therefore they are entitled to a waiver by this board. So you will be waiving the bulk requirements for lot area and lot width based upon legal advice that they are entitled to it as a matter of law under these circumstances.
all right. I'm going to offer a motion based on the legal advisement of our attorney on the substantial burden of the bulk requirements for lot area and lot width be waived at this point.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Rich, I don't hear you? I said aye. Okay, that's 5 yes. All right, gentlemen, so you have until the 2nd of August to get your plans in to the building department.
Okay.
That would be for the ARB and for everything. We have this public hearing on the 16th. We will just, their review of the seeker, checking on the minutes to see whether we did the lead agency. and we'll take up everything at the next meeting.
The applicant also, when you hand in the ARB, this is in an area subject to the ridge preservation. It's really it's an expansion of a home, and the home is probably doesn't have a significant impact. But look at those regulations, make sure that you submit either narrative or something with the ARB that represents your position on ridge preservation.
It's actually, Stu's right, that, it should be underscored. Although there are similar goals and some similar requirements, there are different requirements as well for ridge preservation versus ARB. So just make sure you comply with both, and look at the code and make sure you're complying with both.
Okay, no problem.
Can I ask a question? With the building of the shul, is it going to be taller than the current height of the house?
No.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that one. And then I know you have a building permit from the building department. I haven't been up there recently. You're not making any other,
No,
not adding
I believe
height or
they're-
anything?
No, I think they were renovating the interior of the house and redoing the exterior, the siding.
Okay, so there was nothing to the house itself right now that had any exterior work, only interior-wise?
Correct, and I'm not sure if they redid the siding or not on the house.
Okay, all right.
Nothing structural,
And you're going to keep the same colors, I presume?
yes.
And you'll list all that with the manufacturer?
Yep, we'll give
Yeah.
you the front elevation and the side elevation, and the colors and the type of materials. And
All right, check with the building department, there's a form to fill out, because we have to have that into the
Yeah, that's
resolution.
the ARB,
Yep.
okay.
And you'll probably have to bring some samples for the public. You have a book or something, those little
Yeah,
tiles?
yeah, the color, yep. No,
Yep, all right.
very good.
Anything from us? You're good? All right, gentlemen, have a good night.
Thank you, too.
Thank you. Consultants, we have anything to discuss?
Not from me.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn. Have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.